Star Wars, the expanded universe. A universe so vast that has over 17,000 characters from various different eras, from Dawn of the Jedi to the Old Republic, to the prequels all the way to the Legacy era. This is the tale of over 17,000 characters throughout the Star Wars universe. This is our first step to a much larger world that exists in the Star Wars universe. This is the story beyond the movies. This is the story of the Star Wars expanded universe. A universe loved by many. A universe that helped shape what this franchise is today. This is their story.
Hello everyone, Darcenova here, and I haven't reviewed a comic in a while. I'm going to review Crimson Empire. If you're watching this on Star Wars Reviewers, this is the one that got the second most votes, so I'm reviewing this next. Crimson Empire was written and drawn at a time where the novels focused so much on the big three, and I feel like at this point they actually were branching out with the X-Wing novels and the comics. It was cool to actually see characters, that weren't related to any of the main characters anyway, or any of the movies. And this is one of the few comics that did do that. This is a mini series, so this, I believe, is a good story in its own right. I believe that it can be enjoyed even if you have not read a lot of the expanded universe. This basically follows one of the Royal Guard. Two of them, actually. One of them are antagonists and one of them are protagonists. And the protagonist is Kir Kronos. I believe that's right. Correct me if I'm wrong. And his mission is to avenge the Emperor because of the betrayal of Connor Jax. And this actually gives you some insight, on what happened in Dark Empire 2 and 3, because you actually learned what happened. And I feel like this book, this story does kind of redeem Dark Empire 2 and 3 a little bit, but not a lot. It does explain certain things, though, which I think it's a good thing that it did that. And also, it is really cool. You get to learn about the Royal Guard and how things work, and when it gives you a brief look into their, what it takes to be one. And I gotta mention that, the story, I think, is well paced. I read this in one setting. I think it's a really good story. It's one of the best in the expanded universe, in my opinion. I can't comment on the comics because the novels is where most of my knowledge lies. But I feel like this is a pretty good story. There is 2 other ones, so I can't comment on those. I'm aware that this is really hard to find now because how expensive it is on Amazon and eBay. It's actually cheaper to buy the trays and the individual issues than to get the complete saga that comes with the entire trilogy. I heard nothing but mixed reactions with the other two, and this one is considered the best of the bunch. Now, what do I think of the story? Well, like I said, it's really good. Now, since this is a comic, one of the most important aspects is the art. In my opinion, I do believe that art can make or break a comic. If the story is good, but the art is meh, I do believe, it can make it a kind of less enjoyable to read because, in my opinion, I think art could be everything in a comic because, what a character, their expression on their face or their emotion, if it looks shitty and it doesn't match what they're saying, then it could ruin, the enjoyment and you're better off reading a novel. But this is one that it doesn't do that. The art is really good. This is like late 1990s. So here's an example of some good artwork here. Of course, one of my favorite fight scenes in the entire expanded universe is in this book. The action sequences are well drawn, which I will say that. The antagonist, Jax Connor, I think he's a really cool villain. Even though he's only in one, story, I thought he was a pretty cool villain. I thought he was a really cool character. And I don't mind a few one-off villains. And this era is pretty interesting in Star Wars, I will say that. Because the Empire is in shambles at this point. And I find this one of the most fascinating eras of the Star Wars expanded universe. Because what happens to the Empire after the Battle of Endor? You see it slowly decaying, getting weaker and weaker. Just like an empire would if its emperor were to die. And various EU works, you see warlords, and various people fighting over what's left. Of course, this gives you some insight on, the guards and their training and their loyalty to the emperor. Because these are Palpatine's most loyal warriors. And they'll fight to the last man. And it is interesting because you don't really know anything about them. And I doubt that they're going to expand upon that in the new universe. But, they were trained by some of the best in the galaxy, and Kira Kronos is a badass. He actually is. And I feel like a book with him works. He doesn't have much dialogue, and I do find him an interesting character. I do feel like because he doesn't speak that much. Not saying he barely speaks at all. He speaks a good amount, but I feel like he speaks enough, but he doesn't speak too much. I feel like the panels that you see when you see a glimpse of his past, I feel like the panels themselves tell you more about him and his actions than any words do. And I think it works really well because characters that talk too much, it ruins them, in my opinion. And of course, the artists, the way they drew TIE fighters and X-Wings, here's another example of some pretty freaking good artwork. This is an era where, in my opinion, Star Wars comics were at their best. I think they had some of the most talented artists out there. It isn't like now where Marvel, I'm talking about modern Marvel, where most of the talent now in comics is in like Image and various comics, or DC. Marvel's best artists left long ago, and Dark Horse, I feel like, is when the franchise was at its best creatively and artwork wise. I mean, here's another example of a great action scene. and you can actually the impact that his sword has on the stormtroopers. You could actually feel it. These action scenes are actually jaw dropping to watch or to read, whatever. You know what I mean. I've had a long day at work, so I'm sorry if I get a few things messed up. And this is my definition of a badass. Here's another scene here that's really cool. Basically kills the pilot and fucking destroys the TIE Interceptor. He is probably one of the coolest Star Wars characters ever. And he barely talks. This is, in my opinion, is not every Star Wars character has to say a bunch of shit to be cool. And I believe, a man of little words, is more interesting than a character that talks constantly. And at this point in the comics, you don't really get that many stories, as far as I know, that tells, it more from the Empire's point of view. I feel like every character in the story was interesting in their own way. And I don't believe, any character felt useless. And the person who drew this knew what a Star Destroyer looks like. It isn't like now where, this is back in a time where it wasn't style over substance like Star Wars has become now with their current comics. These are actual people that actually have their own style, but it still fits the Star Wars universe. And they actually try to add something meaningful to the universe. I'm trying to give out as little spoilers as possible because I feel like I think a story like this is best experienced if you actually read it yourself. I'm not gonna give away the ending, but I feel like this was a great read from start to finish. The artwork it took me longer to read this than it normally would because the artwork is so amazing. This is the thing I love about the classic Dark Horse years of Star Wars. That not only were the stories great, but the art was as well. And these were really talented artists. Yes. It's just, to me, a good Star Wars comic is something that stands on its own legs. And when I see a ship that appeared in the movies, such as the TIE Interceptors, the B-Wings, the X-Wings, I know immediately it's that ship. I'm not saying that the old Expanded Universe doesn't have some bad comics with bad artwork, but I'm saying that I feel like this is where they were at their best, artist-wise. And here's another good panel. All right. I'm just going to show you one last scene before I end this. Just look at this, how awesome this looks. This is pure badassery. And seriously, this is a great read. Even if you just want to read a good action story, this has plenty of that. And I'm going to show you one last scene. I said that last time, but I'm not going to spoil the ending because the ending to me is something that you should read yourself. The duel between Carrera and Kronos is some of the, Jackson and is some of the best, fights in the expanded universe. And I'm not going to show you more because it'll spoil the ending. It's a good story, and if you're looking for a good action, Star Wars story, it works that as well. If you want to read something that is told more through the Imperial's point of view, or you want to read something a little different than what you're normally used to reading in Star Wars, read Crimson Empire. It's a great read. I'd give it a classic rating because I think it's one of the best Star Wars stories, and I highly recommend it. This is Darth Sinovia. We're going to be in episode 40 next time when I do the next video. And I'm looking forward to that episode. Will I do Dynasty of Evil as my 40th episode, or will I do Korran Voss Jedi in Darkness? I don't know, but I want to do something a little different for my 40th episode. Nothing grand or anything. I might, I think I'll do just that. I'm not going to spoil what I'm going to do, but it's going to be interesting. Anyway, have a nice day, everyone. This is Darth Sinovia, over and out. May the Force be with you, and have a nice day, and see you next time. Peace out, everyone.